All right, I'm guessing he needs no introduction, but I'd be remiss if I didn't give a short introduction. Rick has a long history of service, over 40 years in LA under 3 mayors. You started your company in 1987, and I saw 20% compounded returns, and the Grove is the #2 mall in the country. And we'll obviously talk about Steadfast in LA and everything as it relates to the fires. Maybe the easiest place to start is, how were you so prepared with the fires? You obviously saved your mall. Did you see data points that the city of LA and others didn't see? Did you just act on them? But talk about what you saw in the leading up to the fires.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for being here. When we started building the Palisades, it was right about 6 months after we started building the Miramar up in Montecito. And what happened up in Montecito, I'm sure all of you remember this, up in Santa Barbara, they had a terrible wildfire in Montecito, and then a couple months later they had terrible rains. They had the mudslides, they had the boulders that came down the mountain, all of these things. So we learned a lot, and what we did in Montecito was we built with non-combustible materials, knowing that we're in a fire area. We had private firefighters on standby. We had retardant trucks on standby. Fortunately, the fire never got too close to the Miramar, but we learned a lot. When we started building and designing the Palisades, same thing. There's not a combustible material on that property, knowing that it's a fire area. But we have a rapid response team that is designed to respond to natural disasters. And when the wind warnings came out, I think it was January 3rd or January 4th, that manual comes off a shelf. We have a head of that department, and they mobilize. And so the private firefighters were stationed, the water tanks were stationed, the retardant was stationed at the right time, sprayed on the buildings. But, the main thing was we designed it right, and we were prepared. And thank God we were able to save the village and a number of the buildings and 8 homes around us.
Was it possible that LA could have been as prepared? Or, I know you were the first one to come out and talk about the lack of water, or was it too hard to do it at the full city scale?
No, listen, the city was not prepared at all. And I've been very vocal about it because I think we've got to be honest about the problems that you have. You can't fix a problem unless you're honest about the problem. So what happened in the Palisades, you had 40 years of brush that had never been maintained. That was rocket fuel sitting there. You had the main reservoir that was feeding the hydrants empty. It had been empty for, I think, almost a year because there was a tear on the cover. It's just crazy that can even happen. The fire trucks were not pre-deployed. I got a call we had to evacuate along with our family, and I got a call about 9:30 at night from one of our senior people, the head of the rapid response team, that said, "I just want to let you know, Rick, your daughter just lost her home. It's in flames because the fire hydrant stopped working." I said, "You got to be kidding me. I've never heard of such a thing happening." He said, "No, they ran out of water." How do you run out of water? And so I just think it's such a terrible failure at so many different levels of what happened. Sure, we had epic wins, but I do think it could have been prevented. It could have certainly been substantially mitigated. You did not need to lose thousands and thousands of homes.
How many houses, I forget, have been lost?
I think in the Palisades area is about 7,000 structures, and the Altadena area is about the same. And if you go to Altadena or the Palisades, I don't know how many people here have been to either of those regions, but it literally is carpet bombed. There's not anything standing, and the fires were so hard that cars melted. It's a terrible, terrible scene to drive through.
When you look back at kind of the city of LA's response during that time, when you think about your own career, so much is around leadership. Anything that it taught you in terms of things to avoid, but how do you think about leadership in that times of crisis? Because it's the same whether it's a city or business.
Well, listen, I think all of our expectations are for our leaders that we elect are to be ready, to be prepared, to be present, to make tough decisions, bold decisions. I don't know, I don't have access to what meetings happened before the fire came out. I can tell you what we did. We were constantly meeting, constantly on the phones together with the senior team. We were getting hourly updates before the fire started on how we were prepared, how many trucks were stationed there, where they were stationed, et cetera. But I think the expectation is really simple. Do your job. You have a job to do, and the number one job when you're an elected official is to keep people safe. And there was a failure of that. And I think in business, it's the same thing. You know, our number one job in business is to be true to your mission, be true to your shareholders, be true to your customers. And we try to do that every day on all of our properties. And we make the customer the number one priority. The customer experience is the number one priority. And everybody wakes up every day in the company organizing around that. And I think every elected official and appointed official needs to wake up every morning and say, what am I doing today that's in the best interest of those that I serve? And that should be the only thing you're focused on.
Yeah. Can we change gears and talk about Steadfast LA in terms of what it is? Maybe just give an overview and then we'll dive into it.
So I formed this nonprofit called Steadfast LA. If you go to the Palisades, or if you've been to the Palisades Village, there's a statue that has been there since we opened it. It's from a great artist, and the statue is called, we named it Steadfast. He's standing there with his hand over his heart, facing the American flag on the pole, and it's about the loyalty to things that are just good and right and true and important in a community. So that's the birth of the name for the nonprofit. And the nonprofit has a singular mission of getting people back in their homes as quickly and safely as possible, and starting to build their homes and rebuild the community. And whatever the problems are, we're issue driven. So I'll give you, for example, there are so many people that were underinsured, moderate income, low income, either in Altadena or in Palisades, as you know, because you and Paris have been very involved and generous in both of those neighborhoods with that community, that will never be able to rebuild because they don't have the insurance proceeds or they don't have the money. So we formed a partnership with a company called Samara that builds modular homes, and we're donating roughly 100 homes to those most in need. And the great thing is, up in Altadena, well, probably the first ones will be, because the county is ahead of the city in the cleanup. Within a few months, we're going to start delivering homes, and people are going to start going back into their community. We're also looking at just cutting through the red tape of plan check, how you can turn that into an AI model, which is already developed. Amazon is donating their time and talent for that. It will cut down plan check from weeks or months to hours. We need to underground all the power lines, all the utilities, build a city with the backbone of the future, don't rebuild what was there. So that's the stuff. We're talking about bending the curve every day, shortening the time frame. And it's what I'm spending every day of my life right now doing, and I'm glad to do it.
Yeah. When you think about it, like when I think about your career, right, part of the success of the Grove was you understood retail entertainment before anyone else, right? You understood destinations and shopping. Other things that you're thinking about as they rebuild LA, is there a use of AI, 3D printing? You just talked about the modular homes, but obviously there's the utilities. But what are other things that LA should be thinking about, or you guys are going to be thinking about at Steadfast, even if you haven't solved them yet?
Well, this is the perfect audience, Carter, and you're the perfect audience. So Steadfast LA, I invited, just to start, about a dozen people who are the best and the brightest.
That's awkward, Rick. I haven't gotten my email yet.
Because I haven't wanted to trouble you.
All right, I appreciate that. Next
week. But we're going to call on you. But, it's the folks from Amazon, like I said, the folks from Esri, the JP Morgan on the finance side, a bunch of different talent. This community, this area, our city, our region, has some of the smartest people in the world with some of the best technologies that are either able to be deployed now or about to be deployed, or can be modified to enhance the quality of life. The first thing we should be doing is getting everybody's ideas. Backstage, talking to the gentleman that is bringing down the cost of undergrounding utilities to the same equivalent of those above grade. If he pulls that off, that's a game changer. Because every elected official that I've talked to, the first thing out of their mouth is, we can't afford to do that. Really? There was just $250 billion worth of losses. How can you not afford to do it, right? So I want to be able to tap into you and everybody who's in the business that understands the technology that's available for us. Huge opportunity to rebuild Altadena and the Palisades from an infrastructure backbone for the future of the next 100 years. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah. And how do you think about what needs to change at the government level, whether it's the state level, the local level? Will this swing the pendulum back? People tell stories of it took them years to remodel a house, but what needs, you obviously have a lot of smart technology people, a lot of people like you thinking about it. What needs to happen on the other side to accomplish all this?
They got to be responsive to the public that they serve, and they got to cut through all this crap and difficulty to rebuild a home. I'll give you an example, and I've raised it with it from the governor on the way down. Right now, if you don't know, you can rebuild your home on an expedited basis if you're in the Palisades, and I think the same in Altadena, to the same size home plus 10%. Well, on its face, that sort of sounds nice. It's completely impractical for so many people. If somebody was living in a community for the last 30, 40, or 50 years, and they're still in their original home, maybe that original home is sort of a cottage-style, beautiful home. And I guarantee on either side of that home is a home that's probably 4 times the size. So why is this person now penalized? Not incentivized, penalized, and can only build up to 10%. And sort of looking at things, our elected officials need to look at things through the lens of being an actual user. I know years ago when I started my business, I sat down with a very successful person. I still do this. I love just meeting people and picking their brain who are successful in a lot of industries and learn. I think curiosity is so important. And I said, what's the number one piece of advice you would give me? And they said, be the user, be the guest. And everything we've done as we built our projects, we look at it through the user or the guest eyes. Our elected officials have to do that. And people are in pain, they're suffering, they've lost not only their home, just as bad, if not worse, they've lost their community, they've lost their church, their schools, their synagogues, everything's burned down. So we've got to move in a rapid fashion to get people re-engaged and back part of a normal life that they're used to.
And how does it work? Like, how can they rebuild thousands of structures? How do you do that in actuality? I'm picturing, all those people trying to build on the same street, right? Like, any ideas on how this actually happens?
It's going to be tough, but there's models that can do it, right? Builders who build master plan communities, and I'm not suggesting that Palisades should become a master plan community, but the protocols, the scheduling of all of that can be done, right? So you can get the infrastructure and everything underground as you're building up and coming out of the ground. That happens all around the country with master plan communities. What the city and the county should be doing is bringing those builders in and saying, give us your best advice and give us your best people, give us your best project managers, donate them. My suggestion was, take the Palisades, take Altadena, create zones, divide the zones into different project managers, incentivize them for quality and speed, and go at it. Is it going to be complicated? Sure. But it's going to be worth the complication. And I also think what we have to do more than anything, Carter, is we've got to give people hope. So we have to start building so people see that actually there is going to be an ending that's going to be really happy. Because both Altadena and the Palisades, when you think about it, everything's going to be new. It's going to be the only communities in the country of that scale where everything, new schools, new churches, new synagogues, new sports facilities. It's going to be incredible to live there. So we got to get through the heartache and the devastation and the pain. But on the other side of it is going to be something, and it should be, if done right, really, really rewarding and spectacular for the residents.
And when you think about it, we have the Olympics in 2028. Will LAE be rebuilt by then? How long is this project, you think?
Well, I'm going to get myself into trouble. But I'm worried we're going to be ready for the Olympics, not because of the Olympics committee, but because I don't see a lot happening in the city. I think more needs to be happening. But listen, we've got to be ready. The answer is we've got to be ready for the Olympics. We've got to put our best face forward. This is a huge opportunity for tourism, for travel, for supporting business, for having Los Angeles be the place where everybody wants to live. That's what we've been known for. We're in the most beautiful spot in the world along the coast. You know, Malibu is going to be a much different place to be driving up the coast. Is all of that going to be rebuilt in 2 years? Most likely not. Yeah. Will it start construction within a year? I think it should, if done right.
And what does the city of LA have to do to avoid this in the future, right? We're going to rebuild, but things aren't going to change. What do they need to do? What would you do if you were sitting in City Hall?
Well, you got to maintain the brush and not allow that to ever happen again. You've got to fully fund the fire department to have the amount of equipment that you need. The fact that we've got equipment sitting in mothballs because we don't have the money to start the engines and have them working is just, it's a sin. We were loaning our private equipment to LA Fire Department because their equipment did not have what needed to have in order to put out some of the fires in the area. I mean, that's just criminal. The amount of taxes that we pay in this city and this state, the fire department should be fully funded. And we need to have people that are really smart and qualified and competent in leadership positions, both elected and appointed, that understand how to run very complex organizations, to be prepared for these things and to be able to respond.
Yeah, all right, let's do it. I agree.
Isn't that such a simple rule? It's sort of embarrassing that you even need to say that. You know, it should just be like, can you imagine in all of your businesses that you say, hey, let's go hire somebody who's really unqualified to run this division of my company. It's mind-boggling to me. But anyway, hopefully these fires, again, as tragic as it is, people have sort of woken up to the need, because we all deserve that. That's their job. And do it right.
But when you think about these governments, is it, you know, when you think about all the problems during the fires, is it they need more money, or is it the lack of leadership? Is it that they've done stuff the old way? Like, you know, there's a lot of instances of people like you have been wildly successful in the private markets, going into government and just changing the pace, looking at stuff with fresh eyes. But whether it's LA or California or the federal government, what do you think needs to change just to, you know?
Well, I think you got to get out of the old ways. I mean, the old ways got us to where we are right now. And over 100,000 people are homeless because of this, in addition to the homeless population we already had. You know, I was down in Newport Beach the other day, and I had lunch with the mayor of Newport Beach. Now, very different city, no doubt, different complications, different scale. And I just asked him, I said, how many homeless do you have in Newport Beach? They're down to 10. I said, 10,000? No, 10. He said, and we'll have the 10 housed in the next few weeks. It's just mind-boggling me. So it can be done, but it's not going to be done unless the residents literally exercise their votes and hold elected officials accountable. And I get people sort of get to the point, oh, nothing's going to change, you know, I get that. But we got to break that cycle. And so leadership has to change. The pace at how we do business has to change. I worked for 3 mayors. Most of you probably don't remember them. I worked for Tom Bradley, I worked for Dick Reardon as a commissioner, and I worked for Jim Hahn. They were all remarkable leaders in different ways. And we had a remarkable city. And but they were very demanding, very smart, and they knew how to drive to excellence. And we need to get back to that, just like what everybody does here, what you do.
Yeah, I remember I heard you talk to an anecdote when you were on the police commission and changing that. How do you find that balance? You know I've heard a lot of criticism of politicians. They're always thinking about the next vote, the next re-election cycle. Kind of what's been your experience with that? Because I know you've had some.
Well, you know, I've always believed, I think it's true, every elected official, the number one priority is to get reelected. because their worst nightmare, if you're a career politician, is to actually have to get a job. And I don't mean that disparagingly. That's just their frame of mind. That's why they go from the city council to the assembly to the county. They just sort of rotate around. And the problem with that is there's no incentive to take risk. There's actually every incentive not to take risk. So the story that I had told Carter, I said before, I'll be brief about it, was Jimmy Hahn asked me to be the president of the police commission. It was at the time, about 20 years ago, we had rising crime in LA. The police department was losing more cops than it was taking in. It was right after the Rodney King beating. The police department at LAPD was being run under a federal consent decree. A federal judge was actually overseeing it. And we had a very popular chief of police at the time named Bernie Parks. And very nice guy. We were friends. Literally looked like he came out of Central Casting. Very handsome, lean, black gentleman. Wore the uniform to perfection. Terrible manager. And the policies that he put in place were so arduous for the cops because he had this reporting system if there was a complaint, that if there was a complaint against you as a cop, you were literally frozen in time in your career until it was adjudicated, and it would take about a year to adjudicate. Well, what did all the gangs do? They started filing complaints against cops, and those cops just stayed out of those areas. So they had a free-for-all. So I went to Parks and I said, you got to change it. I'm not changing it. I ended up firing him. Politically, it was the worst thing you could do is to fire a very popular black chief of police. And they were burning me in effigy. Tina would call me. She said, they're burning you right now. It's on the news. They were marching. They shut down. We were building the Grove. They shut down construction. And I called Jimmy Hahn and I said, I'm going to recommend and we're going to hire this guy named Bill Bratton, the best cop in the country. He wasn't from LAPD. He had an Irish Bostonian accent. Again, not the politically correct thing to do. But what happened? We brought him in, gave him the right tools, not more money, the right tools and the right people. We got crime down to levels not seen since 1950. If I had been worried about being reappointed or reelected, I would have never made that choice. And to Jim's Hahn credit, he said, you go ahead and do what's right, Caruso. And he didn't get reelected. He only served one term because the African-American community was very angry at him for doing that. He did the right thing, and the city was better for it. We need to go back to those kind of people that are literally willing to put their jobs at risk, like all of you do every day, to make good decisions for the right reason.
Yeah. One thing I was thinking about as I was prepping for this is I obviously know your family. You have an amazing family, wife. You're one of the most successful businessmen in LA. Why the heck do you want to serve this city, and why do you care so much? You know, like, you got the perfect life. Look at you up here. But what makes you so excited? You've obviously served over 3 mayors, over 40 years. Like, what is it inside of you that makes you so passionate about LA and passionate enough to speak out and be that voice of reason during the fires?
You know what? I feel so blessed in my life. And my grandfather was a gardener, immigrant. My dad was born in a coal mining camp. And how lucky have I been to given the opportunity, to do what I've done. And this community, the greater Los Angeles area, just massively embraced me and what we've built. And so I'm grateful to the community, and I want to get back to the community. And I just think it's the way I was raised. It's the right thing to do. We were raised as a traditional Italian family that my grandmother always said there's always room at the table. And I think there always needs to be room at the table, and that means giving back and helping. So I feel really lucky that I can do it.
Cool. Yeah. I have to say, when I was prepping and I saw you got your first commission at 26 years old, I was feeling awfully inadequate, thinking about what I was doing at 26.
I just wanted a badge. I was single, and I figured, my God, if I had a badge and, I never told Tom Bradley that, but boy, I loved having that badge.
Did it work?
It worked in many, many ways. That's a whole book that will never be written.
All right, I think it's the last question, but I think everyone in this room wants to know. You're going to be mayor next, governor next, president. What do we got, Rick?
You know, there's time for politics. Right now, I want to help. I want to do Steadfast. I want to get people back in their homes. And do I want to serve again? Yes, I would be honored to serve. And we'll see what that path is. I'm not quite sure what the path is, but we'll see.
And if people want to, have good ideas for Steadfast LA, do you,
Oh, yeah.
donate? But what do they do to contribute to your efforts?
You know, I would love that. If you go on steadfastla.com and sign up, or you can email me directly. My personal email is really simple. It's rcaruso@caruso.com. If you have an idea, whatever it is, let us know. We just want great ideas and help people out.
Cool. Rick Caruso,
Carter,
we
thank you so
appreciate
much.
you.
Thank you very much, everybody.